Good morning before downstairs. We are grateful to the congregation in Yeshua and congregation of Torah to join us in bringing Weiss and congregation Congregatoin to join us in bringing the Weiss community season. We're grateful to many individuals that seize upon the opportunity to partner with the shul, the doctors Rebecca and Eddie Gans, to Jordana and Jason Jacob, who the Nishmas Titus Yitzchak, to Sharon and Ari Reader, to Jennifer and Michael Whitaker, the Nishmas Esther Bas Mordechai Menachem and Terry and Yisuk Kirasik, to Deborah and Avi Glansman and Chaim John Franciscan, all of whom had in mind the neshama of Nachman, Daniel, Ben, Hayitzi. We're grateful to Annie David Blumenthal and Yosef and Chaim Book and Gila and Carl Guzman and the Ellen Zeddy Schulhoff and Julie Dr. B. Silverman and Gwyneth Armazlotnik, who had in mind Dr. Ali Miller and Neshama Yisrael Bas Talmanara. It was just maybe 10 days ago that Rabbi Yudin stood here. He will be joining us in a few moments. And reminded us of the Gemara. Echad ben achabur sheneis, kedam kol achabur kula. Reminded us that we are a community that suffered great losses recently. Of course, Nachman, Daniel, Dali, and then in a short time afterward, Dr. Irene Riemann Miller, and he reminded us, Yidadu Kol HaChabura. It was just then a very few days afterward that we had the opportunity to host our wife, and you can think of no one wiser and no heart that is more compassionate, no one with greater insight that could take Rabbi Yudan's mandate and help us understand this period of time for our community. Otherwise, it's my great honor to present to you a community that learns your Torah, that quotes the Minchas Osher, our Torah, and the Shuvas of the Minchas Osher. The community that feels your concern and that is blessed to be edified by your insight and your Torah. And that's a great comment to present the shul to you this evening.
ושוב תמור דעת של רבנו רבר, של הרבונים, dear friends, I've been here many times in the past, many times, and usually for happy occasions. I'm happy to be back again. But we've come together tonight to talk, to discuss, to try to understand suffering, tragedy, maybe more accurately said, to try to understand what is our duty when we experience tragedy and suffering. Ultimately, we don't understand the Kodesh Baruch Hu's ways. The greatest individual who ever walked the face of this planet was beyond doubt Moshe Rabbeinu. It is clear in Bavli, in Yerushalmi, in the Grosh Chazal, specifically in the Rambam, that Moshe Rabbeinu tops the list, greater than the other Sedashim, than all the other giants of our tradition. And nevertheless, the Gemara in Brochus of Zion says, so when Moshe Rabbeinu stands before the Baruch Hu, after tragedy strikes cloudy soil, and he pleads with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, Hoidienu es Hareinu nu es koidecho. The Gemara says, Bikesh Moshe Leida, Sadik Baraloi, Rosh Hashanah. Moshe pleads with the Kodesh Baruch Hu to understand the phenomenon of bad things happening to good people, of tzaddikim that experience pain, suffering. And there's a machlokes between two of the greatest tanoim, Reb Meir and Reb Yossi ben Chalal. Was Moshe granted an understanding? Was his plea fulfilled, granted for him? So maybe even Moshe Rabbeinu was troubled and grappled with, do we understand tragedy? So I think our duty would be to understand how are we to respond. On my way here, I just stopped in for a short while to visit the wonderful Morris family, Arian, Miriam, and Iana. And for me, it was a very moving experience and a painful experience to see the wonderful people coping with such a tragic war, losing a young boy with so much trauma, such an obvious bright future, such a sudden way to say goodbye. At some stage, most of us cope with tragedy. So did I and my family. Suffering and tragedy is part of the human experience, much more so part of the. We are the chosen people, but we've been through more trials and tribulations and pain and suffering than any other. So this is part of the Jewish experience. And whom do we look up to for guidance? Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, arguably greatest talent, or one of the greatest. Definitely the greatest talent of his era. He was the one to teach us. Hold the Avida Rahmana, the path of. So tragedy and suffering comes in many forms, many shapes. Sometimes Midasadin strikes a community, a generation. And sometimes Midasadin manifests itself in the life of individuals. The tragedy is tragedy, regardless whether it strikes a community, a generation, or individual. And then a Sayan is always the same. So at the end of the second Brachas, Chazal tell his story. Rabbi Akiva was traveling, and all he had with it was a candle to learn by night. A rooster, the ancient version of an alarm. As obviously then had a smartphone, that don't wake up in the morning. But he had a rooster. Krois Ageva, early in the morning. And his Cadillac was a mule. That's all he had. Comes to a city, to a town, asks, is anybody willing to host him? I don't know what type of town that was, but nobody was willing to host the greatest sage of the generation. So he went out in the field, lights his candle to learn better. The wind blows it out. A cat pounces on his rooster and devours it. And then at some stage, a lion kills his mule. And the kid is sitting there in the dark. Tell me them, and he said, tell me them, my come to the door. Don't take this to heart. I promise you, told me over that I wanted to. And within a very short while, it became obvious. Told David Rahman. So sometimes we're lucky. And it doesn't take more than a few moments to realize things are good or better. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it'll take a lifetime, and sometimes you will never. But when we don't understand, we still believe. Many times I heard from my great Rebbe, the Kleisenberger Rebbe. So there's a halach in Hilchos Kriyas Shema when we say Shema Yisrael, we cover our eyes. So the positive interpretation, as quoted in the Shulchan Aruch, is just to avoid distraction. Because when we say the very first pasuk Kriyas Shema, which is the essence of Kabbalat Malchut Shemayim, we need to consecrate. So just to avoid being distracted by what we might see, we cover our eyes. But then the great Rebbe asks, so would it be enough to close your eyes? This seems to be symbolic. If you have covered your eyes. So what the Kleisenberger Rebbe said, we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu. We all know that Shem Havayah symbolizes Midat HaRachamim, while Elokim indicates Midat HaDin. Sometimes we experience days of beauty, of mercy, of happiness. Sometimes clouds block the light of the sun. Sometimes it is a manifested. But ultimately we believe Hashem everything in a way. Yes, we cover our eyes as if to declare and to teach. We might not see Midat, but we believe, so we cover our eyes. regardless of what we see, regardless of what we feel. And we feel tragedy because we're human. That's the way Kodesh Baruch Hu wants us to be. We cover our eyes and we declare, we believe Hashem, yeah. And in a way, Kodesh Baruch Hu wants us. The call the Avidah Manala. There's another story about the Kivans that hasn't talked about. We shall follow Rabbi Eliezer Haggadah. The teacher of Rabbi Yeshua, ultimately Rabbi Akiva, and most of the other sages of that generation. And when we old and ill, the greatest of his Talmidim came to visit. And they see Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkinus on his deathbed. Reb Tarfon is the first to speak. And he says, Rabbi, Toivatul Yisrael, people shall be shown. You mean more to us than rain. People shall be shown beyond Zevata is Ubebo. And then Rabbi Yeshua, Toivatul Yisrael Megal Galchana. You mean more to us, to Israel, and the rays of the sun. Number 3 is Abalosa ben Azariah. He says, we love you more, and you mean more to us than our father and mother. The last one to speak up was Rabbi Akiva. What can he add on after his 3 great Kaveh? Describe Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkin. What he means to Christ. And Rabbi Akiva trapped everyone present. Says Rabbi, Chavidim Yisuri, Shemalina Ta'adam Kori Balaka. Yisuri are precious. Pain and stuff. How much courage did Rabbi Akiva need to see his Rebbe himself? And after his 3 great friends who were older than he was, and all they had to say is to compliment Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkin. And Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi Chaviv Yisuri, Shehem Alimat Adam, how do you imagine Rabbi Eliezer? Was he angry? Was he taken aback? He totally ignores what the first 3 had to say, as if he didn't hear. He leans up and he asks the Akiva, Zomenayan, please teach. How do you know? And the Akiva darshans are closer. Rabbi Eliezer says, Samchuni ve'eshma. That's the same Rabbi Akiva that said, Kol Yoda. But I think it's far easier for Rabbi Akiva on his own trial, suffering, to be Makabe Yisur B'Yahava. But when you see the God Lador and your great Rebbe, his suffering, how much courage and strength did Rabbi Akiva need in those circumstances, at that moment? So these 2 stories deal with the pain and suffering and difficulties of a yogi, of an individual, as great as he may be. But then there's a 3rd story of Malchus Makkah of Yemen. Malchus Sayurim Yerushalayim. Even Shegiu, the Beis Hamikdash, Ushu'ah, Yerushalayim, Beis Hamikdash. Gathering around them. If he'll have made a choice, they're the given a time. They all started crying. And as the people was smiling, And they were taken aback and they asked the keeper, "Can you tell us what's so amusing? Why are you smiling?" And he asked them, "Why are you crying?" And they say, "How could one not cry?" Mokem shekosav. V'azora kol yumas v'yachshav shualim hetubo. And the keeper says, "Lekach ani nitzach." What brings you to tears gives me so much pleasure. And I smile. So to make a long story short, the Maharal explained that the depth of every ghost brings forth the glory of every Gevurah. Now, the more painful the ghost, the more magnificent the glory. So Weiss was more magnificent than the second Beis Hamikdash, because God's Messiah was for 400 years. And the Maharal writes, we could imagine the glory and the beauty and the simcha of the coming of Gevurah Shalem after 1,000 years. So the Akiva says, when I see how awful, how horrific the manifestation of love, I saw exactly what you said. But in my vision, I could see the glory of the Lord. And that is the thing. He always has it prayer and the power on the inside of the house. You see light in the dark. You see that. You see that. We all recall the story of Avodah Shabbat. Master Bereb Eliezer, Bereb Yeshua, Bereb Parman, and all the commentators of the Haggadah wondered, what brought all these great Tanoim together, and why in the neighborhood? Rabbi Eliezer and Yeshua, the two Rabbeim of Rabbi Akiva, he's a Talmud of the two elders, both Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania and Rabbi Eliezer. No. In a way, Rabbi Akiva is a Talmud of a Tarfin as well, as we find in various sources of that. What brought them all to the neighborhood? In the new version of a verse of Pesach, I mean, that's such a I printed yet. I share a thought. Will it be oinoi? Truth. And that is what I do. It was in the days when Klal Yisrael finally understood that our days of glory are present before. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. But Bar Kokhba, also known as Ben Koziva, continued to fight the Romans. And he was a mighty warrior. And he was victorious in many battles. Many believed that Akiva announced them that he will turn the tide and he will overcome and overpower the Romans and rebuild the Beis Hamikdash in a very short time. Yerushalmi, at the end of Tanis, we learned that Rabbi Akiva said, Deinu Malka Mashiach. Bar Kokhba is the Mashiach, and he will bring the Gevurah. Bar Kokhba fought 52 years after. But finally, in the days of Beit Tav fell. 400,000 warriors in Bar Kokhba's army were annihilated, including Bar Kokhba. Masada fell, and everybody understood that we're going into a long, dark war. Pesach approaches. The people are shattered, devastated, in deep depression, hung like a cloud. Where do we go? Who is going to run? that the teacher, not the book that everybody comes with. The greatest and the greatest teacher of the inspiration. It was the first Pesach after the final destruction, after Beitar fell, Bar Kokhba's army was vanquished, he was killed in battle, and all the great leaders of faith, they remembered the basic leadership. Pesach, everybody came to Yerushalayim more than the other Sholosh Shalonim to bring Korban Pesach. So they all come to the beginning to learn the Torah of those with such strategy. So that is our motto for thousands of years. We cover our eye. No one more than Eov symbolizes tragedy. So at some stage or the other, you all read the state of Eov was a tzaddik, becoming an unbelievable tragedy struggle. Children died, his house was reduced to rubble, and he sits and cries and bemoans his fate, and his friend come to console him. And then a lengthy discussion unfolds, and each of us speak ideas, different philosophies about the nature of suffering. So the story of Eov starts with a storm, and at the end of the Sefer, it ends with a storm once again. And suddenly, Kodesh Baruch Hu appears. And Kodesh Baruch Hu asks some profound questions. Eifo hayita b'yossi haaretz, hageina miyodat otino. Were you there when I created the world? Do you understand anything about it? Rabbi tells us, please come in. Please. Just notice you saying, please. הנגלו לך שערי מודס, שערי צל מודס. And my understanding, Kodesh Baruch Hu tells Eov, you and your friend, you got it all wrong. You got it all wrong. It is not about trying to understand. It is about learning to accept what we can understand. We can never figure out a Kodesh Baruch Hu's way. So you'll be wasting your time trying to understand. We weren't there when it Kodesh Baruch Hu began. And there are phenomena that we cannot understand. And our challenge is accepting things that are above and beyond our ability to understand. That is the Messiah of Jewish tragedy. But what we do learn from the Rambam is that whenever tragedy strikes, a community or an individual, Kodesh Baruch Hu calls out to us, and we need to be better. We need to come close. Roy Novi Ani Velo Ben Novi. And I am dismayed when great people try to say, why tragedy? It is 2,000 years since we had Nevi'im We don't understand why. But we do understand that a Kodesh Baruch was going out. So the Rambam in Hilchos Taniyos says, and in Hilchos Taniyos he deals with hardship, difficulty, suffering, tragedy that strikes the community or a city. And there are 3 protim in Masechet Tanis at great detail about fasting, davening, blowing the shofar. But the Rambam says ultimately we must understand this is not coincidence. This is providence. This is Hashgacha Pratit. And the Kodesh Baruch was calling out to us to come back to Him, to do tshuva, to be better. Im terfu imi bekeri, afani elech gimochem bechamasken. And the Rambam's interpretation different than Rashi and the other. It's Maloshem Mikra, coincidence. When tragedy strikes, don't think it just happened. Just think it's nature. It's Hashgacha. And the Kodesh Baruch is speaking to us. And He wants us to be better. We find the same thought in Hilchos Avel of the Rambam. When tragedy befalls a young, an individual, or a family. And the Rambam, like the Rambam in Toras Adam, both say that an Avel needs to do tshuva. Like suffering of a community, tragedy, and sorrow of an individual. We need to be better. We need to come closer to it. And I cannot say to any community like this beautiful community. There's so many, I know so many of you. And everybody I know in Teaneck is a wonderful person and a good Jew. Obviously, I don't know the others. That is what I see. So I cannot find shortcuts in the community and say exactly what you need to do. But each and every one of us knows his shortcut. And each and every one of us has to take it on himself to be better. Learn more Torah, have more kavon in your davening, do more chesed. But I do want to share with you one profound thought that we find in the teachings of the Ari HaKadosh. Lekutei Torah Parsha Shtoit, and just a short explanation. The Ari HaKadosh wrote nothing himself. All the Torah we have from the Ari was transmitted by first and foremost of his disciples. He was the one to formulate that to write the entire Torah. So Lekutei Torah Parsha Shtoitim on the pasuk Yapolam Kudaho Bein Dam Ledam Bein Nega Menega Bein Din Ledin Chaim Vital quotes Ari. In the days of the Churban Beis Hamikdash, Malachi Hashem, the angels of above came to HaKadosh Baruch when they wondered, Rabbeinu Shalom, you're not observing your own Torah. And the mitzvahs you gave us, you do not seem to practice what you preach. And it is clear in many sources of Bavli and Yerushalmi that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way is Mekayim, the mitzvahs of Torah. So the angels wondered, Ato Omarto, V'shofach Hasdome, V'chisot V'ofo. You gave us a mitzvah of Kisui Adam, and you didn't do the same. Domam Nishvach Kamayim V'ein Koivet. You gave us a mitzvah Oto V'ed B'no Lo Tishtatu B'yomecho. You don't slaughter an animal and its offspring in the same day. But that is exactly what you did. It said Yoamelech and his children were murdered and slaughtered at the same day. Ato Marto, question number 3. In Tumas Anega Nige Batim, the Pino is a bias, and only then the Rock is a nega. And the Mishnah Masechet Nagom explains, we want to remove all the vessels, all the kalim for the house before the Kayan declares Tumas Anega. And why is that so important? Because Klei Cheres Ein Lehem Tahara B'Mikvah, and we want to salvage the kalim. And that is why the Poet says first the Pino is a bias. We empty out the house, and only then the coin comes into the house for the time of the nega. And you did not do the same. You destroyed the Beis Hamikdash and you didn't salvage the clay Hamikdash. What was the Kodesh Baruch Hu's answer? The Medrash does not say. If he answered at all. Kodesh Baruch was not compelled to answer anyone's question. But the Ariya Kodesh does answer. So that he said that these questions are merumas in the Pasuk. And you won't understand. Pay down and down. Kisuya down. Oisaves benoim. Pay nega le nega. That's the question of Negoim. What is the answer? Ivrei rivois bishore. When there is machlekes, there is no manifestation of midas. Nothing brings forth midas a bit more than discord and machlekes. So these 3 mitzvahs are somewhat the manifestation of midas. But when there's machlekes, when there's a lack of action, it is only midas that takes command. And that is the answer. So when tragedy strikes, the greatest gula is to come together, to focus on what unites us, and not what drives us apart. We are just moving out of a terrible year, a year of tragedy, the COVID-19 pandemic. This was an epidemic we knew nothing like it for more than 100 years. It was a year in which we lost tens of thousands of our brethren. 6,000 people just in Israel, many more in the Jewish world. So it was a year of Midas Adin. And I feel at the beginning of this pandemic, it brought out the best in us. There was this feeling of compassion. Every person that passed away, it made the news. We all heard about it. We identified with the families. We tried to be machanzek one another. But as this pandemic brought out some stage, it began to bring out the worst. And machlekes and Chilul Hashem, I have tried my best to serve Klal Yisrael. Well, in halacha, I'm trying to guide in the light that Kodesh Baruch Hu gave me to see and understand. The time has come to bring people together again. And the Ahava is Ahava, the Ahava. So this evening, a wonderful young man asked me, should I daven in a shul which was totally negligent in social distancing and wearing masks? And I said, yes, you could daven in that shul. I tried my best in this year to teach what's right and what's wrong. In Israel, this pandemic is practically being very much. and the Jewish community in America by far and large. And time has come to turn a page, and once again come together. Nothing enhances tragedy and suffering more than related. Nothing is more Why must I put a smoke with maxi broccoli and start a little of show? What is the expression "clean maxi broccoli"? My understanding and interpretation is this: Mashallah man had today, whatever it means you want, whether it's wine or oil or coke or whatever it is, you just go into the store and everything's bottled. In the days of Chazal, it is obvious in Mishnah and Gemara, people brought vessels from home. And the innkeeper or the shop owner had barrels. And he gave whatever you needed in your cater that you brought from home. So a people comes into the most expensive, person comes into the most expensive store and he says, I want yayin. And the shop owner looks into his bottle and says, I'll be happy. But this bottle has a crack. By the time you get home, nothing will be left. It's good for my business because you're going to come back and buy an additional load. But how about go home and bring the bottle again? Because these things are HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives and he wants to give and he's happy to give. Shefa Eloki from the heavens. HaKadosh Baruch Hu just pleased with us on the form he was grateful. You should have the ability to receive and accept the blessings of prophet that I wish to bestow on. By Matzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu is all kli machzik bracha elo hasholah. What are those vessels that we could take all those brothers home? That is Torah. And that is the expression of the That is the kli to just accept and hold on to the brothers that HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestowed. So my message to any community that has witnessed pain and suffering, as this community has, each and every one of us needs to just have some introspection and examine himself what he needs to be about, where he can be better, where he must be better, and ask him. This famous line in the Tefillah of Rebbe Melech Mezrach. And we only to thank Abraham Tate for making this well known. Because I doubt any of you know any other line from that same Tefillah. It's 3 pages. So we thank the singer for popularizing one line. And that is a very important. Hey, believe שנראה כל אחד מה לא חברינו. We should see the beauty in everything. We should see the beautiful spark in every Jewish. Each is a area of so my telephone to the body of my friend and to all the others that have experienced loss. In this community, and in here, we should only know that. When I come and see him, we should be circle the color. Be as well said, it is amazing. We have all our understanding. And we should be circle to opinion based on
Available outside for sale, available to everyone.